Hello everyone, I'm Eugene, 45 years old. In this video, I want to share about the biggest mistake of my life. I made a serious mistake having an affair with my daughter's boyfriend. When the truth was discovered, our mother-daughter relationship was broken forever. At that time, I realized I was wrong, but it was too late. I share this story not to seek forgiveness, but to warn those who are in the same situation as me, not to fall into the same rut as me. And now, I invite you to join me in this story. I'm Eugene, and my life before everything happened was very simple. Just me and my daughter, Sui Yan, living in a small, quiet house. My husband passed away in an accident not long after my daughter was young, leaving me alone to take care of the family. To support the two of us, I had to sell fish around the neighborhood. The work was hard, but it also helped us have a stable life, at least until an unexpected change happened. One autumn afternoon, a day I will never forget, my daughter Sui Yan, then 20 years old, brought her boyfriend home for the first time. When the door opened and the two of them walked in, I felt a little confused and curious. This was the first time I met the boy my daughter had chosen to be with. Jian Sui Yan's boyfriend was tall and handsome, with a confident demeanor and a bright smile which caught my attention. He looked like a mature, steady man, completely different from the boys I had met during my years of selling fish. The two of them entered my house, and I greeted them politely, but also somewhat awkwardly. I told them to sit down, then went to make tea to serve. While I was busy in the kitchen, I couldn't help but notice Jian's eyes, which were confident but unfamiliar. Part of me felt that something was wrong, but I couldn't explain that feeling. After making tea, I brought it out to serve them, and we sat down, chatting a bit about work and life. At that moment, I thought everything was fine, that we were living a normal life like any other family. However, I had no idea that this was the moment that would mark the biggest change in my life. I told the two of them to sit down. Sit down, I'll make some tea, and went into the kitchen. My heart was a little heavy, but I tried to keep the atmosphere in the house from getting too tense. I brought out 2 cups of tea and handed them to them. Sui Yan's eyes lit up when she saw her boyfriend. I smiled slightly, but I felt a little nervous inside. After that, I went back to the kitchen to prepare dinner. While I was busy cooking, I asked Jian, "Do you want to stay for dinner?" He nodded, and I felt relieved, knowing that I would have a little more time with him. Once dinner was over, we sat down to eat together. The atmosphere suddenly became more comfortable, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety that was lingering in my mind. After finishing eating, I took out the bottle of wine that I had kept for many years. This was a bottle of wine that I had kept for special occasions. But today I felt like it was time to break the ice. We drank and talked. Our conversation started off light, then gradually deepened as the glasses of wine opened our hearts. After a while, Sui Yan, out of joy at having her boyfriend over, drank a little too much. She seemed a little drunk, and I had to help her into the bedroom. I saw my little girl looking so weak right now, like a child in need of protection. When Sui Yan was already in the bedroom, I went back to the living room and continued drinking with Jian. The atmosphere now seemed to have changed. There was something vague, but very clear in Jian's eyes. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes no longer gentle as before, but deep, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, I realized that his eyes were not just normal attention, but desire. Something I was not ready to face. I tried to dispel that feeling, but Jian quietly moved towards me. I didn't have time to understand what was happening when he slowly took my hand. My heart was confused, but I couldn't pull my hand away. He pulled me closer. I felt like the world around me suddenly became too small. The air seemed to thicken. "Let me go," I said, my voice trembling a little. But he didn't let go, just hugged me tightly, as if he wanted to hold me back. I tried to resist, but couldn't understand why I couldn't escape from his arms. "Jian, let me go," I said again, but he remained silent. His eyes cold, not leaving me. I felt a chill run down my spine, my heart pounding. But something seemed to have changed in that moment. I couldn't explain the feeling, but I knew that things had started to turn a corner that I couldn't turn back from. At first, I tried to resist. Every rational part of me told me that I shouldn't do it, that I had to stop before it was too late. But there was a feeling rising in my heart, a feeling of emptiness that I couldn't deny. It had been a long time since I'd felt close, without anyone by my side, and in that moment, Jian's presence was like a gentle flame, warming my cold heart. That feeling, even though I knew it was wrong, still made me unable to suppress it. I wanted to feel loved, wanted to feel the closeness that I had been lacking for so long. But my heart kept on warning me. That night we didn't say much. The air in the room was heavy and quiet. The dim light made everything even more ambiguous. We simply acted on vague emotions that I couldn't explain, as if we couldn't resist. The feeling came so fast, so strong, that I could do nothing but let myself be engulfed by it. As the night passed and the morning began to break, everything seemed to return to normal. But I knew, even though we said nothing, that everything had changed forever in my heart. The emotional patches that I couldn't shake off weighed heavily on my mind. Even though I didn't say anything, I could feel the change in myself. I thought that would be the end of it. We would go back to our old lives. And I would forget about that feeling, forget about what had happened. But then Jane's appearance once again shook everything up. When I went home with my daughter to play, Jane came back, and this time things became even more difficult to control. When Shoyan went to take a bath, I couldn't help but feel nervous, as if I was facing a choice that I didn't want to face but couldn't refuse. When we sat down to dinner, everything went on as usual. I tried to maintain a warm atmosphere in the family, but a strange feeling crept into my heart. Every glance Jane gave me was confusing, making me wonder if things could continue as before. And then, after dinner, Jane told Shoyan that he wanted to stay the night. My daughter, without any doubts, happily agreed without knowing what was about to happen. I couldn't help but feel that there was something different in the air that night. Something heavy, but I couldn't explain it. When night fell, I heard Shoyan sleeping soundly in the room, and I couldn't deny that I had another vague feeling in my heart. It felt like I was standing at a crossroads that I couldn't turn back from. I wanted to stop, but there was an invisible pull within me that I couldn't escape from. I knew that this couldn't go on forever. But right now I couldn't do anything but face the uncontrollable emotions in my heart. Every day that passed I felt like I was sinking deeper into a quagmire that I couldn't escape from. Every time Jane came over I knew what would happen, but I couldn't stop myself. That feeling, no matter how wrong it was, always had a strange attraction. Every time I saw him, my heart beat faster, and the feeling of long-standing deprivation was filled. Even though I knew it was unacceptable, Jane started coming over more often, each time. A furtive meeting, as if we were living in a separate world that no one else could understand. Every time I convinced myself that it was just a small mistake, that just one more time and I would stop. But as time went on, I realized that I couldn't stop. Every time he came, even if it was to talk to my daughter, there was an uncontrollable urge in my heart, and I got bogged down in it. The conflict in my heart became more and more obvious. I loved my daughter, but I felt an inexplicable attraction to Jane. These thoughts haunted me endlessly, like a never-ending spiral. I knew I was doing something wrong, but in that moment, the feeling of being cared for, of being noticed, of being loved was too strong. I couldn't resist it. And then, once again, Jane suggested that we go out, not just meet at home. He wanted to go somewhere else, somewhere. No one knew, a hotel where we could meet without fear of being discovered. I felt a pang in my heart, as if I was stepping onto a path from which there was no return. But even though I knew it wasn't right, I couldn't refuse. I felt like I was sinking into a world I couldn't escape from. Every time we met like this, even though there was satisfaction in the moment, every time afterwards, I felt a sense of guilt invade me. I couldn't sleep well, I couldn't eat normally, and every time I faced my daughter, I felt like there was an invisible wall separating us. That feeling, even though no one could see it, I knew it was growing. And there was nothing I could do to change it. But despite everything, I couldn't stop. I knew I was losing everything precious to me. But in those moments, I couldn't stop. I was like a boat drifting without knowing where to stop. And every time I saw Jane, I felt like I was sinking deeper into a quagmire that I knew would drag me to the end. On June 15th, that evening, Suhan's best friend had a birthday party. My daughter, full of excitement, invited Jane to join the party, but Jane, citing fatigue, declined, saying he didn't want to go out. As Suhan was about to leave the house, I saw that Jane was still there. And we didn't say anything, simply continuing to pass by the irresistible moments. Right after my daughter left, Jane came to me again. Even though I knew I shouldn't continue, I couldn't fight the feeling that had been lingering for so many days. That night, in the silent house, we fell into an unstoppable spiral. From the looks to the words, everything just led to a result that I knew would hurt everyone. And then Jane slept in my room, as I once again let myself be swept away by the whirlwind of uncontrollable feelings. The next morning, while I was still in a daze, Suhan returned. She definitely didn't intend to come back early. But when she didn't see me, my daughter came into my room to find me. I didn't think it would happen that way. I didn't think she would come into the room right then. When the door opened, Suhan stood still, eyes wide, unable to believe what she was seeing. Jane and I were lying next to each other, not hiding anything, and I knew everything was falling apart. My daughter screamed numb. Jane, what are you two doing? That moment was like a blow to my mind. I saw Suhan standing there, her eyes red, her face full of hurt. She didn't say anything right away, just sat down and started crying. I knew I couldn't lie anymore, couldn't hide anything anymore. My words, no matter how painful, had to be the truth. I stood up, faced her, and I admitted everything, without any cover-up. Every word I said was like a knife cutting into my heart. I'm sorry, Suhan. I know I did wrong. I can't explain why this happened, but I'm sorry at that time. I thought maybe she would forgive me, or at least understand what I had gone through, but I was wrong. After hearing that, Suhan stood up and turned to Jane, saying, "You have to leave the house now." Those words were like a verdict, cold and unchangeable. She turned to me, her eyes filled with tears, but without a trace of pity. "I'm not your mother anymore. I'm not someone you can trust." And then, in a moment, Suhan turned away, walked out of the room without a word of goodbye. She started packing, preparing to leave the house. I rushed out, calling her name, begging her not to leave. I begged her to forgive me, but all my words were meaningless. There was nothing I could do to keep our mother-daughter relationship. That feeling, that loss, was like a painful punch to my heart. I ran after her, but Suhan didn't stop. She didn't look at me, didn't give me a chance to make things right. When I stood there, in the middle of the empty house, I realized it was all too late. Everything has changed. There is no going back. The mistakes I made cannot be fixed. My daughter, the person I love the most in the world, left and cut off all ties with me. I could do nothing but watch her, blame myself, and feel extremely guilty. Through this video, I want to send a message to everyone who is in the same situation as me. Stop before it's too late. Don't let weakness, temporary emotions cloud your mind. Appreciate what you have, because when you lose it, you can never get it back. I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. It was an expensive lesson, and I hope you can learn from my mistakes. Thank you everyone for listening to my story.